And welcome back to Coaching with the Bible. This is episode 107, the first, the calendar year of 5783. The portion this week is the portion known as Vayelekh, the third to last portion in the book of Deuteronomy, the third to last portion in the 5 books of Moses as we close in on completing our second cycle. Season 2, episode 53. Happy New Year, everyone. Our topic this week on lasting impressions. I hope those of you who celebrated this week the Rosh Hashanah, the New Year, had a very meaningful and enjoyable holiday as we come up onto the second and third leg of the holiday season coming upon us already this week with Yom Kippur and the following week with Sukkot. It's a lot of celebrating ahead of us. And our subject this week is leaving lasting impressions. And it comes up really simply based on the idea that in the Bible this week, in this very short portion known as Vayelekh, we get to learn about the second to last commandment, which is the commandment to hold an event every 7 years known as Hakhel, where the entirety of the community would gather at the temple to hear the recitation and the reading of portions of the 5 books of Moses, particularly the 5th book, by the king or the power, the leader in the day. So everybody would attend. And the Bible is very specific as to when this would be. This would be after the 7th year, after the year of fallow, which this year in the land of Israel was in fact the year of fallow. So effectively, this event known as Hakhel, this ingathering, would be taking place in a week and a half's time, because the Bible is very specific that on the first day after the first day of the holiday of Sukkot, of the upcoming Tabernacle Festival, would be the day in which this event would take place. So you can imagine the streams of people already coming in for the holiday itself, but standing there and being there at the temple, experiencing the spectacle of all the priests and the king and the trumpets, because it describes how there's a lot of accompaniment in terms of music leading into the reading. And then the king himself reading these portions of the Bible out loud to the people. It's an incredible scene, incredible thing to think about. All the magistry and the pageantry about it. So we sort of saw some of that on the other side of that recently with the passing of the Queen and all of the pomp and circumstance, for lack of a better term, but all of the pageantry that went into and the formality that went into mourning her and bringing her to her final resting place and her funeral. That entire period is fascinating. I thought it was fascinating to watch, to sort of see how organized and actually impressive it was, and impactful that it was on the people and on everyone around. You can get that sense of how that would look if we had to flip it over on the side. And you saw that also in her case, in her life, with the different celebrations on Jubilees and on different anniversaries and things like that. So the Bible describes this incredible event with the king. And it's fascinating that the people that are required to attend are not simply those who are the scholars and the people who are appreciative of what the texts are that he reads. So it's not just people who can learn, who can study, who can interact with the language, who can sit and pick apart a text and go into the Talmud and try to figure out what it means. It's not just them. It's everyone. It's men, it's women, it's children, it's the stranger among them. It's all kinds of people are to participate. But if they don't understand, what are they doing there? So the commentaries across the board make the idea that the purpose of the event is not simply just hearing the words, but it is also the experience itself and the impression it makes, especially on the children. This is not an event that takes place once a year. It takes place once in 7 years. Biblical cycles very much exist in cycles of 7 days, the 7-year cycle, the 7 cycles in terms of the counting of the Omer and the 7-7 cycle, the 49-year cycle leading up to the Jubilee year. There's a lot of sevens. But imagine the following scene. A child first attends this event at the age of, let's say, 2 or 3. Let's say 3. The next time they show up, they're 10. Then they're 17. You're 24. The difference in where they are in their life is dramatic between each event. Yet they remember the prior experience. It leaves a lingering and lasting impression and impact on them. The truth is, we like to be part of big events. We like to go to spectacles. We like to participate in them. We like to feel like we're part of it. We like to belong. One of the things we do when we're talking with people with respect to fundraising, in terms of crowdfunding in particular, we talk very much the idea that why this works is that people like to be part of things that are bigger than they are. As much as that we are individuals, we like to participate in big events, in big projects. We like to connect with other people. It's good for us mentally, but it's also good for us emotionally, and it's certainly good for us spiritually. We definitely get that we need that. So if we've gone to a concert of 80,000 people, we've been to a sporting event that had a massive crowd, whatever that is, part of it is seeing the spectacle in person, but part of it is being part of the community that's there and belonging to that group of people and participating with them and feeling that deep, deep personal connection among all of the people, as disparate and as different as they may be. And it leaves an impression such that you probably want to go do it again. Such that when you think about it, maybe it makes you warm inside, but it puts a smile on your face and it gives you some sense of joy and happiness in your being when you think about it. So imagine being that child who went at 3 and at 10, at 17, who remembers the prior experience, standing with parents, standing with maybe grandparents, standing with siblings, and now watching as the family is now growing. And as this amazing event is happening, remembering what it was then and remembering what it is now and experiencing it slightly differently now and experiencing it slightly differently the next time. These things leave a lasting impression. I was reminiscing about this the other day with Naomi, with my wife. We're talking about slichot. Slichot is the prayers that are said late in the evening or early in the morning for the communities of Sephardic Jewry starting in the beginning of the last month of the calendar year, and for the Ashkenazi communities starting about a week before the onset of the new year. And I was talking about how, as a kid, my parents would schlep us to Manhattan. We would go to a synagogue in Manhattan that we didn't attend at all during the year. And we would go late on a Saturday night. Nothing else would happen. We had to go. And we would go hear a certain cantor and a certain choir lead these prayers late in the night. Now, I can attest that at 8 or at 10 or at 13 or at 15, I had probably zero interest in being there. But we went every year. And it is etched in my mind what that experience was. In retrospect, in hindsight, as I get older, I appreciate it more. I appreciate the impact, the effect, the desire, the want that my parents are trying to instill. It plays itself forward now because when that evening comes up now, so on some level, admittedly, I do this to my children too, thankfully, a lot of them actually do want to go. We experience that prayer service with somewhere between 1,500 to 2,000 people, and it's a very powerful, very meaningful, very impactful event. It leaves its impression. It gets the point across. But if it's once a year, it's one thing. If it's once in 7 years, it's another thing. And so as we mark time, interestingly enough, we mark things year to year, certainly. We also mark things in larger scale, once in 7 years, once in 50 years, that kind of a thing. And so we want to appreciate and want to think about and want to realize that the things that happen around us or the places that we go leave lasting impressions. But that's not enough. When we're thinking about coaching with the Bible, we're thinking about ourselves and the environments in which we operate and in which we live in, appreciate the impressions that we leave on other people, for good and for bad. We never exactly know the impression that we're going to leave on someone else. Should we care? We probably should care. I don't think we want to purposefully leave bad impressions in the minds of others. We want them to remember us for good, but we also want them to remember what we did, or that the experience that they had with us was actually a positive one, was a good one. We talk a lot about in life about first impressions. First impressions, admittedly, I think are unfair, because the truth is when we get that first impression, we know that first impressions last. We know that we never get a second chance to make a first impression. That's famous, and it's from a commercial, and so on and so forth. But it's not fair necessarily because we don't actually know the people. And so there's some sort of, like, as Malcolm Gladwell calls it, there's some sort of like a fragility that exists around our first impressions. And we don't always know when the last impression that we're going to get with a person is going to be either. And it doesn't mean that at every moment we have to be mindful or paying attention to it, but perhaps we should be. Perhaps we have to think about what that's going to be. We have to think about how we make that impression on people, what it is that's making that impression on them. Sometimes that impression is out loud by saying something. Sometimes that impression is by not saying something, or by leaving something unsaid. Sometimes that is simply by how you make them feel, right? The famous quote from Maya Angelou: people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. That is the lasting impression that you leave with a person from your life. And so we want to think about the impressions we're making on others, or the impact that we're making on others, in big moments and in small moments. So I have the great honor annually, it's now annually really, to lead the prayer services on Rosh Hashanah, part of them, and part of them on Yom Kippur. And part of my stress and pressure in going and in preparing and getting ready for it is, what is the impression or the impact or the feeling that I'm going to leave with all those that are participating with me? I really stress about it. At some level in my preparation work, it affects me physically how I feel as I go up and I start to lead the services with everybody, because I am mindful of it. I am paying attention to it. When I'm trying to get the tune right, or trying to pronounce a word a certain way, or try to have a certain intonation or a certain emotion in it, I have to be paying attention to the impressions that I'm leaving, that are there, that I'm having. There's no way to avoid it. It's part of the deal. And so we want to always be paying attention to those kinds of things and appreciate how it is that we leave a lasting impression on it. And so it's important to sort of think about, first here, think for a moment about people who've left a lasting impression on you, an indelible impact on your life. Think about people who've done that in the positive. Think about people who've done that in the negative. Don't dwell on that one for the moment. Think about obvious ones. And then as you're already in this space thinking about it, go a little bit deeper. Think about some of the, what I'll call smaller people or lesser known people who've actually left an impression on you. There's a lot of people who fit into that category in our lives. I wouldn't say it's every day, but as a regular basis are people leaving impressions. The people we're around the most, obviously, are having the most impact on us. Again, both for good, hopefully, and obviously sometimes for bad. But we have to sort of keep this in mind. Now, on the flip side, you've thought about the people who have done this for you. Think about who it is that you are now having impact on and leaving an impression on around you, and how they experience perhaps you, spouse, siblings, parents, friends, work colleagues, It's a lot of people. Our circles are not as small as we think they are. And I would surmise that they're actually much bigger than we actually ever think about. And so there is at that point, a recognition and I think an appreciation of the manner in which we behave, the manner in which we operate, and the intentionality with which we go into these experiences and these interactions with people because of the impression that it could leave, because of the impact it could have on a person. For my own life, just as an example, when I used to teach high school, so I taught a lot of kids over the course of time. And one of the things that I always sort of had in mind when I was preparing material, or I was just thinking about going into a classroom, it was not always about what I was saying out loud, but it was also by how I was saying it, to whom was I saying it, the manner in which I said it, the manner in which I carried myself. I was paying attention, admittedly, to what is the impression of this on this kid, 16, 17, 18 years old. The manner in which I carried myself, the manner in which I showed up, all of these different intentionalities, all these different approaches, I wouldn't call them strategies, but all of the ways in which I show up affect the impression that I leave. We don't control all of the impression that we leave. Some of that is coming from the person who it's being left upon and how they experience us. But we do control a large amount of what it is that we can do vis-a-vis these other people. And so as we think about the impressions that we're leaving on other people, how we are, in some cases, branding ourselves on them to some degree. Again, hopefully for good and hopefully not for bad. Appreciate how that could be. A kind word, an unkind word, disparaging look, a wave off of a person. All of those things have that impression. So the Bible describes it in the context of this moment as this event, and we should think about that because these big events, these big moments, it's important. These are important moments. We have to get them right. But when we separate that out and we put it back into the context of our own lives, and we think about the impressions that we leave and the impressions that we make on other people, those are all the time, and those are with all the people. Let's take a moment. Let's be reflective. Let's look back at the people who are impacting us, how they're leaving impressions on us. Flip it over. Think about how we're leaving impressions on other people. And then in the weeds there, not so much in the weeds, let's think about how we can, show up differently, show up better, appreciate the possibility of the impact that we're going to make, and therefore come at it in a different manner to leave a far better impression going into the future. That is Coaching with the Bible for this week. See you next week.